In this video, I want to talk a little bit about my homeschool journey thus far, being able to get from the mindset that I was in for quite a while, which is that I would take this journey one day at a time, one homeschool year at a time, to where I'm at today, where I really pray and hope that the Lord is going to be able to provide for us long enough where we might be able to see this all the way through. And I don't think that that mindset that I had that was able to get me to this point was a bad mindset. Is what I needed to be able to get here. But I hope that by sharing, you know, a little bit of my story, I'll be able to share how I was able to get from that point to the other. And even though I've been homeschooling, not and, but I've been homeschooling for 8, 9 years, somewhere around there. But I couldn't speak on this topic before. I had a lot of growing to do. I had a lot of growing to do as an individual, as a homeschooler, in my faith. And I just don't think that it's something that I could have spoken of from the place that I think that I can share from today. Not because I think I know everything that I need to do to finish this journey, especially now that we're in a new phase. Our eldest is in high school, and in some ways it feels like how it did when I first started, where in some ways I'm kind of figuring it out. But God is good, and it's going good so far. But you know, as I said, I just pray that the Lord is able to get us through, you know, to the end. Now, before I continue with my story, I just want to say that probably around, I want to say that around the second grade. I don't think it's first grade. I started a little exercise with, well, at that time it was really my eldest. My second daughter was pretty young, where I would just ask them, how they felt about homeschooling and, hear what they have to say. Now, they've never been to public school, but they've heard of public school before. And I'll just ask them how they feel about it and hear what they have to say. And as they've gotten older now, I have three of them, and it has been an interesting exercise. Every year we do it, where I would ask them that, and they know it's a safe space. They can say how they feel, and you know, it's interesting to hear how the answers have changed and progressed in different ways over the years. They tell me the things that they enjoy about being at home, being homeschooled, and as they, grow up and, experience the world around them, their answers have, kind of changed alongside that. And I do that so that they can feel in some way as if they have a little bit, to say or partake in what is their journey, and I'm a homeschooling alongside them. But anyway, another reason why I want to talk about this though is I know of someone who is considering homeschooling. I don't know her personally. I know of her through my husband. She works with him. And she and her husband have been thinking about homeschooling for over a year or so. And she've asked about my experience, my opinions. And as I said earlier on, even though I've been doing this for a little bit now, I don't think that I could have spoken on this topic like where I'm at today. Not because I know, but because I feel as if my heart is in it now for the long haul. And I'm not judging anybody as I'm, just speaking from where I'm at now. So, so there's that. So I want to go back, like way back to Trinidad for a little bit because I want to share some things that I think might be able to give context to some of the things that I want to share later on. So I was on my own. I didn't grow up with my parents, and I had to be on my own from the age of 17, not because I wanted to, not because I chose to, but because of circumstances. And, God is good. I made it through that period. And fast forward a little bit, I think when I was around 21, I was able to land a job at one of the banks in my country. And one of the positions that I held there was as an accounts reconciliation officer. Now, I did do accounting in A levels. I did do in A levels, and it was one of my favorite subjects. And once I started that job, and absolutely loved that job. That particular job, because I held a few positions in the bank throughout the years that I was there, for about 5 years or so. And that job led to me starting to take some ACCA classes. My I had come up with this plan, this goal that I was going to work towards becoming an accountant. I loved doing accounting at the bank, and that was my goal. That's what I decided that I was going to do. But the Lord had different plans for me, and my husband, who is from the Midwest here, he was visiting in Trinidad, and now that's 14 going on 15 years ago. So as they say, the rest was history. Fast forward a little bit, and we had our first daughter. Now, even though he's from the Midwest, he was living in California before we met. And at this time, after I came here, we got married and we had our first daughter. We didn't have family around to kind of help us with her. So we were looking around and find out the cost of daycare. And at that time it was like $1,200 a month, which was quite a bit once we calculated, gas and other expenses and the amount of money that I would have been able to bring in with his. It just didn't make, sense on paper at that time. So we made a decision that I would stay home with her until, she was old enough to start school. And at the time, it's not that I wasn't happy to be able to stay home with my baby, but because I was so used to taking care of myself from such a young age, sorry, that was a difficult decision. It wasn't one where I was, like, it wasn't necessarily that I was unhappy or disgruntled. It's just, this battle in my mind because I was so used to being independent. So fast forward a little bit, when my eldest was about a year and a half or so, someone from his job, same company, but down in the South Bay, a Christian lady, she heard that I was new to the country. I didn't know anyone, and she came and she spent a couple, evenings after work with me. And it's during one of those visits that we first heard the concept homeschooling. Because even though my husband is from here, he had never heard of homeschooling, your children, prior to meeting her, and I didn't even know the word existed at that time. Because homeschooling was not as common as it is or popular as it is back in, it's much more common and back home now. But at that time, even if it existed, I had never heard of it in my little circle of the world. So we heard of the concept of homeschooling, and my husband asked me if I would be, a little while after. My eldest was probably going close to 2, maybe, somewhere around 1.5, 2 years old. He asked me if I would consider homeschooling because I was home with her. And I thought about it for a while. As I said, I was home. So at that time, I said, you know what, I'll do it. I'll take it 1 year at a time. Well, at that time, 1 day at a time, 1 year at a time, and see how it goes. So fast forward a little bit, we had our second daughter, and at that time, I used to look on. I had discovered YouTube, so I was, trying to teach her. Now 2 of them, their ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, watching YouTube videos. Some of the learning channels, discovered, homeschoolers on YouTube, and, battling, just sharing some of the other battles together with, the whole independence battle. Sometimes I feel so selfish, thinking about it from where I'm at today, but it is what it is, and that's how I felt at the time. But some of the other struggles that I dealt with at the time was, feeling as if I can't teach them, like, how would I be able to teach them to read? ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, things that you would teach them in preschool and kindergarten wasn't my fate. I was already thinking, first grade and second grade, and they being able to learn to read. And that particular thing used to scare me. Like, how would I be able to teach them to read? I've shared on here a couple of times that, uh, language arts is not necessarily my strongest forte. But the irony is that you discover as you homeschool them, it's not something that I thought of at the time, but you actually get, if as you teaching them these, their subjects, you get to strengthen in areas that you had gaps if you did, um, by default. So there's that. But anyway, but at the time, I was really scared that I wouldn't have been able to teach them how to read. Um, and through YouTube and hearing about homeschool co-ops and all of this now things, I started to look around in my area. I found Meetup at the time, and I had contacted two different groups. They were active groups, and the first one, they took just a little while to respond. And my husband, this was actually before I had my second daughter. So my eldest, my husband and I, we went to the meetup. We met at a park, and what I will say now is, I wouldn't want someone to. I wouldn't want to enter into a space that someone has created, carved out for themselves, and make anybody feel uncomfortable, in their space. And the same thing, I wouldn't want to bring that into my space either. And I say that because it wasn't a bad meetup. It's just, it wouldn't have worked long term. So, we had a good time at that meetup, and that was that. And the second group took quite a while, where, as I said, it was an active group. We were in the South Bay. And by that time, I had my second child. She was probably close to a year when they contacted me. But it just so worked out that my husband was transferring from the South Bay to the East Bay when they decided to contact me. So I sent them a nice little message thanking them for considering and wishing them all the best. And that was that. So then we moved up, fast forward a little bit, we moved up to the East Bay, and we had our third child. I was homeschooling, still, homeschooling all three of them. And I had, find little resources and figured out by that time. At this time, I was, a little bit more comfortable in starting to teach my eldest how to read. And I didn't have all about reading or none of that at that time, through watching, YouTube videos and Leapfrog at the time, and, learning the proper letter songs through watching like a lot of the kids, like those kids channels that would have like the ABC songs and stuff. But anyway, we put different things together, and we was able to get our first daughter on her way to reading, because she's probably 4 at that time when we got up there. And so we was working on that in the background, but I was still wanting to meet other people that was homeschooling, thinking that would have helped with the journey, being able to connect with other people that was, doing the same thing that I was doing. Because it felt isolating at the time. It truly did. And because, as I shared, I didn't have family on my side that I could reach out to. And I know sometimes even your own family are not in support of you on this journey. And, the other people that I knew who heard that I was homeschooling, even though I would tell them that it's just preschool and kindergarten and first grade at this time. And at that time, I was trying to work through my own doubts, my own feelings. And I had acquaintances and, other people that was questioning if this is something that I wanted to do, if I, think I can do it, which did not make it easier. So I had to start shutting down some of the people, acquaintances, and people that I knew, not, they're cutting them all the way out, but cutting, any conversation that came up in that area because, as I said, I was already battling my own doubts. So by this time in the East Bay, we had all three of our girls, and I decided to join YouTube, thinking that, the whole co-op thing wasn't working out for me physically, which would have been best. And there wasn't surprisingly there wasn't much co-ops at the time. And with my experience coming from the South Bay, now when I was looking for co-ops in the East Bay, I was looking with, in new eyes. Eyes with a little bit more, experience of what I should probably be trying to, look for. And I wasn't finding it. So, at least at that time. So I decided to join YouTube thinking I would be able to, get that, at least from a distance, but, join a homeschool community. That also didn't work out, but I've learned something throughout, all of that experience, and I think it's really nice. It will be a blessing if it is you have other people that you can, in some way or form, walk this journey with. However, I don't think that, and there's a homeschooler on here who actually said the same thing, and I 100% agree that homeschooling is not enough to have in common to be able to share this journey with, and as I said, in the earlies, it used to feel very isolating. As my kids have gotten older, and I have learned I've picked up quite a few, things that I do throughout, as I've spent this time home with them. I've found ways to be able to do this without having that. And I think that has, indirectly, that has allowed my faith to grow in ways that I think was absolutely necessary because, that's who I lean on. I lean on my Lord. But I don't want to make this video about that. So it's not something that, I worry about anymore. I just understand now that if that is something that is meant for me, then it would happen, but it's not something that I allow to, there's so much as I said, homeschooling is so much, work in its own. It's not something that bothers me anymore. Anyway, so I'm already on YouTube. We're homeschooling. I'm learning, as I go. But life is happening. Now we're in 2017 in the East Bay. And no, I need to fast forward a little bit. So we've left the East Bay now, and now we've moved up, to the northern part of California. Now we're in, Sacramento, where we're still at. And my husband had, he had to have surgery. This was not, we've been here for a little bit, and it took us a year to get through, first to get him from, getting him healed and back, on his feet. While that was going on, in the background, I mean, very early on in my journey, I had done a review on, scratch sleeves, and that's because one of our kids, she has eczema, and that was something else that we was dealing with in the background. We are a nuclear small unit, so I'm not saying that eczema is the worst thing. It's just that it was it was something else that we were dealing with in the background. And then, we had to get my husband through that year. And the reason why I'm sharing that is because now looking back, I realized that when you take on like anything in life, right? It's not isolated by itself. So as you are homeschooling, you have life that you're trying to manage at the same time, which can, add to, and I don't say this to discourage, but it is something to be taken to consider, you know. And so as I was growing and becoming a homeschooler, there was these life challenges that was coming, which is life, that I'm trying to balance while trying to grow from the mindset that I had as a homeschooler, and be more heart, be more into it and not just doing it while life kept throwing life at us. So we got our, thank God my husband was able to heal. It took about a year, and that was the July of 2018. And a year later, we had to move from where we're at to where we're currently. We've been where we're at. We've been living here for, this is a home now. So anyway, so that is that. So a year later, we had to move, and we had some health scares that was happening with our second daughter. This was 2019, and it was September of 2019, and I know it was September of 2019 because on my birthday, that's my birthday month, and we had to take her to the hospital. And it took a year for us to, well, we quickly found out what it was, but it took a year for us working with the different doctors. We started working with some doctors in Roseville, and we had to end up going to some doctors down in the East Bay. Long and short of the story is it took a year for us to get to a point where we're at now, where the situation is being managed. And she also has we also discovered some other things with her that we had to figure out how to home. I guess I'm gonna take a phrase that I heard on YouTube. Homeschool her with grace, which was quite a teaching lesson for me as well. So now I want to bring it, focus more on just the homeschooling as opposed to like the outside stories that have affected or contributed to my mindset on homeschooling. Before I go there, now all of that happened, and by the time we got to a medical plan with my second daughter, this was coming towards the end of 2019. And then 2020 is when everything with the world happened, And now looking back, there's just so many reasons that I can see, I understand now why this was the path that we needed to take, at least for our household. And it would be different for you. And maybe you may not know this going into it, but you might discover it along the way. And there's some other things that, I'll share later on. But there is no way that I would have been able, now I understand, to be able, with us being such a small unit, to be able to hold a job and hold on to my independence the way how I wanted to, with having one of our children with eczema and how severe, it became over the years. There's no way I would have been able to have a job, hold on a career when we discovered, some of the things that we had to, and going to the doctor so often with my second daughter. And it was definitely a blessing being available, to help nurse my husband back to health because, and of course, if situation was different, we'd have had to deal with it. But it was definitely a blessing. Now, I appreciate that I was able to be there for him in the way that he has, been there for me over the years when he was, down. But anyway, so as I said, 2020, everything came and happened with the world. And then that's another thing. That's another blessing, at least I see for us. I cannot imagine, with the mindset that I had, with the lack of experience that I had, if I had to quit my job during that period and figure out what it is I had the opportunity and time to figure out prior to that period. And because you know, and I didn't, I mean, all of this was new to me in the beginning, so being already in it, and at that time, I was used to, being home. And so that didn't bother me. So, now it didn't mean it doesn't mean I wasn't stressful in other ways, but from that perspective, now I can look back and see that that was a blessing. And my point is that, there might be blessings. There was going to be struggles. I want to keep saying that because it is not easy, but there are blessings, being able to, to homeschool your kids as well. But anyway, so those are some of the things around me, that was happening around me and to me, that have brought me to this point. It has brought me to a point where I still, have an open mind, in the sense that, even though my eldest is now in high school, if I, even at this late stage, if I ever get to the point where I truly feel as if I cannot do this, and I would be causing her more harm than good by just like saying that I want to finish this off, I have nothing against public school. I would send her to school, And also, of course, if the Lord decides, differently, then I will do that as well. But that being said, all of those experiences, all of those things that was happening to me and around me, have allowed for me to grow in a lot of ways. And before I get into me, I want to touch on the children indirectly. Well, actually, I want to speak about what I've noticed with the children along, this journey, because now, so I had to stop the camera just for a minute and restart it because I was approaching, the cutoff point for the camera. I didn't want it to cut off while I was speaking. So anyway, at this time, now, all the children are well into their homeschooling journey, and I'm able to see different things as we are going along the years. I'm able to, I need to go back just a little bit. When my eldest was 4 going on 5, I said earlier on that one of the things that I was most afraid of was not being able to teach them how to read. And I had a video on here. It's still up, but I had privated it a couple of weeks ago, where I was taping her reading at the table. And the reason why I had shared that video on here is because in that moment was one of the moments where I started to feel where, wait a minute, I can actually do this. Because I was able to see her move from, of course, not knowing, nothing. And with the exception of the help that the good Lord, guided me to, I was able to teach her to read. And hearing her reading at the table on her own, that moment, I would never forget that moment, because that is probably one of the first experiences that I had where I started to have a small shift in my heart, in knowing that this is something that I can do. and you are going to have that experience yourself as well, you know. So anyway, back to, more current times. So as I'm going through the years homeschooling them, I'm able to see them, move from not knowing different things to, getting to the point where they understand different things. Of course, there's curriculum, and I thank God, God for some of the curriculum that we've been able to, you know, get our hands on over the years. And very early on, I used to tend to gravitate to curriculum that walked you through teaching them. It wasn't because I wanted to spend the most money on curriculum, and I thank God that, my husband had the mindset to just, and he was able to, and it was a blessing for me to get some of the curriculum as I was able to get my hands on, not because curriculum is everything. That's not what I'm saying. Because in some ways earlier on, I was thinking that, I would piece things together, piece this together and piece that together. And I quickly realized, at least from where I was coming from, without having that firsthand, experience being educated here and not having other people that I could have conversed with, I think it's possible to do that if you have that, and especially if you are like, if you can teach. But if you don't, it's probably best in my experience to get something. It doesn't have to be the most experience, but something that you can just kind of walk through and teach them using that, and you grow. At first, sometimes it just feels as if you're just reading and you're wondering if it is, like, am I actually teaching them? At least these were some of the thoughts that I was battling with. But then you see them move from one point to the next, and you grow with them, because now just to touch on something, and I'll share this in a mini update. I'm using a grammar curriculum that I used earlier on in my homeschool journey, and doing it now, it's very different, and that's because now I have not just the experience using the curriculum, but I can see how I have grown and being able to teach using curriculum. So you'll get better over time. But anyway, I was able to see them grow from where they were in different areas to where they're at, and being able to experience that with them has been an absolute blessing, and being able to say that, we did that. Um, I'm slowing down because my mind for some reason is trained, and I'm trying to bring myself back, get my thoughts back in order. But I don't want to cut this video. But anyway, so as we are homeschooling, I'm seeing them grow in different areas, and I want to say around the third grade is where my mindset started to shift. I no longer was feeling as if, well, we were married quite a bit of time by this time, and I've been able to, depend and understand that even in our good days, because we don't have a perfect marriage, but in our good days and bad days, I realized I had the support of my husband, and that is a blessing. Not because, as I said, things are perfect, but when it comes to this decision that we've made, I don't have to be afraid. And, that, he's not going to be support. Not just because he asked me to, but you understand, right? So there is that. I have been able to see the children become comfortable in just being, what I see as themselves, without having, and I'm not saying that this happens all the time, but they don't have to be afraid to be themselves, even if it is, they might be they may have traits that probably, if they were in a different environment, they might be afraid to just be. And they've been able to be in an environment where they can just go through those different phases without, being afraid to go through that. Being able to homeschool them, stay home and homeschool them, has allowed me to appreciate the opportunity to be home with them, to see them go through, to grow with them. And somewhere after around the third grade, probably close to the fourth grade, I started to shift from a mindset of, I don't just want to do this year by year, but I appreciate, having the opportunity to, I guess, to grow up, to grow alongside them and see them grow. And I don't want to make it seem like it's because it's easy. I keep saying this, it's not an easy journey. But being able to firsthand see them grow in their education, in their personal, development as young girls. Now I have a teenager. It has been a blessing that I wouldn't have been able to experience in the same way. And I do not see anything with working at all. But it is the truth. It's just an experience that I would not have been able to experience in the same way if I had been able to go and, go back to work. And now I see it as a blessing. And yeah, for some reason, maybe because I've been speaking for a while, I'm starting to feel my mind drifting. But I really hope that I was able to share enough in this video where, if this is something you are considering, of course, giving it a lot of thought is extremely important, because it is not something to be taken lightly. But it is definitely doable. It is not impossible. There's so many resources on YouTube. That being said, though, I do want to say something. Over the years, I have had to learn how to and when to quiet, even though I don't have in my personal space, like, where I'm having too many opinions and stuff coming in. But sometimes I have to shut off even what I might consider good, knowledge or good information from others sharing. And I do it too online. But I'm being honest and telling that sometimes I get into these spaces, not as much now, but especially during the middle school years with my eldest, well, probably fourth grade, sixth grade. So I had to shut down a lot of times and just kind of, figure it out on my own, because it was just too much information coming in. And sometimes I think that that's necessary. If it is, you think that, I think that it's excellent, of course. As I said, I'm on here too. But sometimes it's necessary if you feel like, whether you're comparing yourself. That's something that I struggled with very early on in my homeschool journey. It's not something that I struggle with anymore, thank God. But if you find yourself like comparing yourself, to other homeschool moms, and it's nothing that they did, it's just human nature, I think. That might be a time to shut everything down, not permanently, but for a while, because there's, quite a few homeschoolers on here that I like watching. But anyway, and sometimes you need to quiet down if you feel yourself comparing yourself. If you feel yourself being overwhelmed with too much information, you might just have to walk along alone, with the Lord. If you're a Christian, walk with the Lord for a while. And then when you feel in a better place, you know, turn, turn it back on if that's what you desire to do. But anyway, um, it's definitely, possible. So it's not an easy journey. It's one that needs to be taken with a lot of thought, a lot of prayer. If you're a praying person, if you have help from and support from family, I think that would make the journey even better. But if you don't, you know, it is possible. You just have to find. I used to hear a lot of people say this a lot before, you need to find your why. And I didn't understand before what that meant. And now I know a lot of my whys, why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I've seen my kids grow up to be, I call them young women, even though my youngest is only 9. I've seen them blossom into the kids that they are, where, I have, they very, they, I don't have, luckily, thank God, I don't have, rude kids. I'm able to, just talk with them. They feel free to just talk and just be themselves. I I've been able to learn, and which I think is good for them. I've learned along the years how to homeschool them, with all of them learning differently, which is something that I don't know if they would have been able to experience the same way. Not because, but anyway, I've been able to homeschool them even though they all learn differently. I've learned how to not compare them, something that I struggled with very, very early on, thinking that they will all be, learn the same way. And that's why I had such a wrong mindset when I first started, thinking that I would just buy, one set of curriculum, and that would get, I'll be able to use that with all of them. And I quickly learned that because they learn differently, that was not going to be the case, at least for me. Um, but yeah, it's definitely possible. It can be done. Sometimes you may have to walk this journey on your own with prayer and thought, but it definitely can be done. It's 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 not an easy decision. I want to say that one last time, but it's definitely a rewarding decision. And I say that not, really praying and hoping that I'm able to see all of them all the way through, you know. But anyway, I'm going to end this video here because I don't want to just continue rambling. Um, I'll just end this video here. Hopefully, I've shared enough that, you hear a little bit of my story and why and how I became a homeschooler. Um, Also, why it is I've never spoken about it in this way. I didn't think that I could have. But also, more importantly, I hope that in some way, just a little bit, maybe my story might help somebody who might be considering, of course, with great thought and prayer if you're a praying person, but might be helpful. Thank you very much for watching, if you did, and I'll talk to you in another video. Bye.